69 black teenage boys were locked inside a dormitory for the night. By dawn, 21 of them were burned to death. The doors were padlocked from the outside. No one knows who set the fire. Even worse, no one was ever held responsible. This is the Wrightsville Fire. This is March 5th, 1959. This is a tragedy America almost completely forgot. The Negro Boys Industrial School near Wrightsville, Arkansas, was supposed to rehabilitate black juvenile offenders. In reality, it was a segregated prison farm disguised as a school. Boys aged 13 to 17, most arrested for minor offenses like riding a white boy's bicycle, with permission, or soaping windows as a Halloween prank, were sent there. Orphans, homeless kids, children who had nowhere else to go. According to a 1956 report by sociologist Gordon Morgan, the conditions were horrific. He documented, "Many boys go for days with only rags for clothes. More than half of them wear neither socks nor underwear during the winter of 1955 to 56. It is not uncommon to see youths going for weeks without bathing or changing clothes." The building itself was a fire trap, a 1936 Works Progress Administration structure. Old wooden stoves, deteriorating wiring. Governor Orval Faubus visited in January 1958 and said words that would haunt him. "They really need help. They are using some old wood stoves which should be replaced." Nothing changed. On March 5, 1959, at approximately 4 a.m., on a cold, wet morning, fire erupted in the dormitory. According to historical records, 69 boys aged 13 to 17 were locked inside. The dormitory doors padlocked from the outside. No adult supervisor was on duty. The windows were covered with heavy-gauge metal mesh screening. There were only 2 exits, and both were secured. What followed was desperate survival. According to eyewitness accounts, boys fought each other to break through the metal mesh. 4 or 5 at a time clawed their way through narrow windows. Smoke and heat and terror all at once. 48 boys managed to escape by jumping out those windows. 21 did not. When firefighters arrived at the scene, they found 21 charred bodies piled on top of one another in the corner of the sleeping area. Most were still trapped in their beds. The governor's response? Damage control. Orval Faubus, a staunch segregationist, held a press conference at 6 a.m., while the bodies were still burning, to blame the black superintendent, Lester Gaines, for not having an employee in the dormitory. He fired Gaines and several other staff members by afternoon. Here's the crime within the crime. At that same time, near Pine Bluff, the institution for white juvenile offenders had 2 adults on duty every night. Their dormitory doors were unlocked. No padlocks, no mesh screens, no children burned to death there. The double standard was written in ashes. An investigation was launched. A committee determined that the correctional facility, the state of Arkansas, and the local community all shared responsibility. But it recommended no specific course of action. The Pulaski County grand jury found no one to indict, no criminal charges, no accountability, no justice. The families of 7 boys had private funerals. The remaining 14 boys? Their bodies were wrapped in newspaper and buried in an unmarked mass grave at Haven of Rest Cemetery in Little Rock. 14 black children, wrapped in newspaper and thrown into an unmarked grave. The state of Arkansas paid families between $3,300 and $5,900 in damages. But white attorneys representing those families took as much as half that sum. One family reported receiving only $1,400 for their child's death. And then it disappeared from history. The civil rights movement was happening. The country was focused on Little Rock Central High School desegregation. The Wrightsville Fire, one of the deadliest fires in Arkansas history, faded into silence. 60 years of silence. No marker, no memorial. No one remembered the names of the boys who burned to death. Until Frank Lawrence, the brother of one of the victims, decided in 2019 that he would not let his brother's death be forgotten. He began working on a documentary. He went public. He demanded justice, not in a courtroom, but in history. In 2019, a monument was finally unveiled at the site of the original facility, which had closed in 1968. In 2018, a plaque was placed at Haven of Rest Cemetery listing the names of all 21 boys. 60 years. That's how long it took for their names to be publicly acknowledged. CNN released a podcast series titled Up from the Grave, narrated by Don Lemon. It forced America to confront what it had forgotten. But Frank Lawrence's question remains unanswered. Was this negligence or murder? Governor Faubus claimed it was an accident. But the locked doors, the mesh screens, the unattended facility, the disparate treatment of white boys at a different facility, the immediate blame placed on a black superintendent, the buried bodies in unmarked graves. Some historians argue these deaths were not accidents. They were systemic racism playing out in fire and ash. These 21 boys, Roy Hegwood, Willie Piggy, John Alfred George, Henry Daniels, Amos Geis, O.T. Meadows, Willie Lee Williams, and 14 others whose names were nearly lost forever, deserve more than 60-year silence. They deserve to be remembered. They deserve their names spoken aloud. They deserve for people to know that on March 5, 1959, a locked door and a catastrophic fire and a cover-up tried to erase them from history. And they almost succeeded, but they didn't. Because Frank Lawrence refused. Because descendants refused. Because someone finally told the truth. Share this story. Comment the name of one of these boys. Because they matter. Their lives mattered, like this video. Subscribe to Ika Mefuna History TV. We tell the stories of the forgotten. We name the children that systems tried to erase. We make sure that what happened on March 5, 1959 is never forgotten again. Because justice delayed is not justice at all. But remembrance is the beginning of healing.